History That Doesn't Suck is sponsored by Indeed. If you run a small business like me, the right person can level everything up. I've got an awesome team, but as we grow, there's more pressure to continue to deliver more history that doesn't suck. So, as I'm thinking about growing the team, I wouldn't just be looking for a writer. I need someone with specific skills in research and citation, plus experience in narrative storytelling. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs is a boost whenever you need to find quality talent. Instead of struggling to get your job post even seen on other websites, sponsored jobs helps your role stand out in search results so you can reach candidates who meet your specific criteria. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates when you join the 3.3 million employers worldwide that use Indeed to connect with quality talent that fits your needs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. You just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. History That Doesn't Suck is supported by Quince. There is nothing worse than feeling trapped in heavy clothes during a heat wave. And that's why my summer uniform has become all about Quince. They make these incredibly high-quality essentials. Think breathable linen and soft organic cotton that keeps you feeling cool while looking totally put together. I recently took a Caribbean cruise with fans. I needed to look sharp for nightly dinners on board, and my Quince European linen suit was perfect. The tailored blazer and dress pants were stylish and literally cool. It's rare to find quality like this without the luxury price tag. But Quince keeps everything 50 to 80% less than similar brands by working directly with ethical factories. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/HTDS for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/HTDS for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/HTDS. Hello, everyone. Professor Jackson here. As you know, we're in mid-June 2026, a mere few weeks away from the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the effective birthday of the United States. I trust I hardly need to explain how meaningful this is to me, and I expect it is for you as well. In the build-up to early July, I'm going to share some special episodes. Don't worry, our World War II narrative isn't going anywhere. But this moment is special. It's hallowed. It deserves reflection. And I want to do that reflecting with you, perhaps especially because I know this anniversary comes with a mix of feelings. There's celebration, yet also a despondency on both sides of the aisle. Fear that we aren't what we were. I understand that fear, the view that these are unprecedented times, but I don't share it. My only real fear is that we will convince ourselves that the American experiment is past, that we will talk ourselves into giving up. Like Abraham Lincoln, I believe that is our only real threat. To quote the gangly rail splitter, who I can't help but read and hear in my own head in that nearly falsetto voice of his. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. I am so deeply concerned about this possible self-fulfilling prophecy that I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears into researching and writing a book that counters this narrative. Not a Pollyanna history assuring everyone everything will be okay, but a history that reminds us we have faced today's supposedly new challenges of fake news, contested elections, and political violence from day one in this nation. That these are old demons. That we have beaten them before, and we can beat them today. That the American people are stronger than all of this. I was recently interviewed by my colleague, Dr. Ben Sawyer, on his podcast, The Road to Now, about my book, Been There, Done That, How Our History Shows What We Can Overcome. Ben pulled answers from me in ways only an old friend and fellow historian could. And I realized this conversation captured something I hadn't fully articulated anywhere else. That's why it belongs here. with you. And before we dive in, the book is now out. Hardback and audio. Yes, the audio is read by me and available from all booksellers. You can also find a link at htdspodcast.com/book or catch me on the road during my book tour as well. Details at htdspodcast.com. And it would mean the world to me if you'd get a copy and let me know what you think. Look forward to more America 250 specials this month, including the story of the Second Continental Congress preparing that world-changing declaration. And now, please enjoy my conversation with my dear friend, Professor Sawyer.
I'm Ben Sawyer, and this is The Road to Now. On a boat, please welcome to the stage my guest, my friend and yours, Dr. Greg Jackson. Greg, how you feeling, man?
Oh, I'm feeling good after your warm-up back there. My goodness, I didn't know I could laugh that hard at 8 a.m.
These guys are awesome. We're on a boat, by the way. For you guys who are listening, you don't know this. We're on a boat. We're on a cruise that doesn't suck, and it's living up to its name. It's awesome.
We are having a good time, 100%.
If you would have told me when I started a podcast 10 years ago that a history podcast would bring people onto a boat for 5 days and 4 nights of just sheer pleasure, I'm not sure I would have believed it, but here we are.
I was having the same thought this whole week. You can relate to this. We got PhDs in history. We're professors. This was not, they didn't put this forward as an option in grad school when they were talking about the career opportunities.
No, they didn't.
They failed to mention podcaster and go out to sea.
They did. And in fact, I was invited to do some things by colleagues this week. And I go, I can't, I'm going on a cruise. And they're like, oh, where's the cruise to? And I was like, I'm not even sure, but it's a history cruise. And they're like, you're going like to do a history cruise? And I was like, yes, I'm going to be at work. But this is delightful, man. And you've got this new book out and we're here to talk about it. And I couldn't be more excited, man.
Thank you.
Greg, up front, I'm going to say that I had the privilege of being one of the early readers on an earlier manuscript. And
yes, sir.
I took so many notes then. And since then it's been revised, I've been lucky enough to read the book and in its final form, and somehow it got better. And I want to start off by reading to you what I wrote originally after I finished the manuscript.
I don't think I've heard this. Have at it, man.
Yeah, and what I still think is true.
Should I be nervous?
Right? And I don't normally read things that I've written down here. No, you shouldn't be nervous at all. Everybody else should be nervous because they're going to try to sell their books and you got yours in the way. Yours is good. All right, so I wrote, Greg's book speaks to the present with an element that's rare these days, wisdom. He finds what's universal. He shows you how people can violate their own dearly held convictions without seeing their own hypocrisy. How good people find their way to bad decisions. And he does it in a way that the reader can't help but contemplate their own place in the story. But he also shows us the way back. And he gives us well-grounded cause for optimism, even while staring straight into the eyes of our darkest moments. Greg, could you start off by telling about the project, the stories that you bring into this, and, how these dark stories explain your enduring optimism about the American project?
First, Ben, thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to do. So thank you. Yeah, I know it's counterintuitive in a way, right? When we talk about the bleakest moments in history, it's usually, well, just that. We're focused on the shortcomings, the failures. Look, we're living through an era. I've heard it in the classroom. I've heard it on the road as I've done the live show, and we've done talkbacks afterward. So I'm meeting people across the country. I have these distinct memories burned into my mind. I even mention one or two of them in the book of people expressing just absolute despondency at where we are currently. And that is what drove me to need to interrogate basically the validity, the truthfulness of that statement or the lack thereof. Now, my gut was that, no, it's not. And in my mind, the Civil War, easy, right there, right? It should be dispelled, but this is clearly not the low point. Now, that's, of course, a pretty sad place to have to go to if you have to point to the Civil War to say it hasn't been worse. So this, to me, became a project that deserved interrogation. And it brings a lot of what the podcast, what HTDS has has filled my mind with, right? For nearly 9 years, I did feel perhaps uniquely capable to do this project. I don't think I could have done it without having done HTDS for as long as I have, on top of the education, right? But I feel like I stared into the abyss, and I mean that truly. Stared into these ugly, dark moments of political violence, of contested elections, of biased or fake news. Actually, I'll say, and I get into some distinctions in the book as I really interrogated what do we mean when we say fake news, and how does that differ, or rather overlap from, right, with hyperpartisan news. And what I came to was the realization of just how tough both the American people are and the system that we have is. And there's a combination between the two that doesn't mean we will endure forever, but I would argue, and I do in this book, that that this republic can endure forever if we, the people, continue to choose that. So in these dark, ugly, bleak moments is actually a blueprint to remind us that we can overcome, we can surmount anything and everything that we are facing at present.
You start us off with the founders, which is a good place. You bring us, and this book goes places, and I want to talk about this in a little bit, stories that I didn't even know, as someone who's been teaching U.S. history for years, and I want to get to that. But you start off, and what I love about it is, I think there is this idea that if you have faith right now, or you're in any way optimistic about the American experiment, that somehow you're naive.
Yeah.
That somehow you must be blind. And you start off with the premise that the entire system itself is not rooted in some optimism about human beings, but it's actually rooted in a very, very, very skeptical view of humanity. And so did you go back and talk about James Madison, Federalist number 10, and how that kind of sets up the story?
Yeah. So one of the things I conceived of this project, and I would say, like any good project, any good book, the author doesn't realize what they've signed up for, right? I mean, you've felt that with research in your life. You think you know what you're getting into, and you have no clue what you have just bit off. I felt that so many times. And one of them was how deep this took me into political philosophy. And within that was James Madison. I did not expect to be citing Madison half as much as I did in this book. But in Federalist number 10, he lays out this premise that, and I want to be clear on this, just because it's said by Madison, that does not make it true or right. Right? So we come back to the Federalist Papers, to things that Madison wrote, Hamilton wrote, you name it, not because we're worshiping these men, or at least that's not why we should come back to it. We come back to it because, at least in my experience, as I've interrogated these ideas, they hold. They had ideas that were greater than themselves. That's where we get to Federalist number 10. And Madison articulates a premise that I completely agree with, as I have deeply thought about this for the last several years. And that is, you cannot have liberty and at the same time not have to experience factionalism. That's the word he uses, but partisanship is the word we use today. So that isn't to say that all partisanship is good. I want to be clear on that. There are absolutely bad practices, but it is actually evidence that liberty exists when you have partisanship. There's no utopia. There's no having this thing that we love, right? Liberty is a word that we bat around in the United States. And sometimes we can even get cynical about the word liberty. Or we two-dimensional it either way, right? We either get cynical about it or we treat it like this overly worshipped, misconstrued concept. But there's a very real and meaningful idea to liberty in the American sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people conflate liberty with what I want to do right now.
Yes.
But liberty is not yours, it's ours.
Precisely. And that's where we get to social contract, right? So within that important framework, Madison is saying, and I completely agree with him, if you're going to have liberty, where you can do a lot of the things you want, but within these spaces where we're also respecting the unalienable rights of others, that's true liberty, one. But two, you cannot have that without having to deal with partisanship constantly. That for me was a real aha moment. And I feel like maybe it shouldn't have had to have been, but it's something where, we kick around this idea that, they should agree, they should disagree better all the time, that we shouldn't have to deal with these fights. Oh my gosh, Ben. No, the preceding generations were no better than us. And I just saw that time and time again, the violence, the vitriol, the cruel things said by the founding fathers, the ones who gave us our highest ideals. And yet, while the ink is still drying on the Constitution, James Madison and Alexander Hamilton are writing the biggest burns about each other and publishing them under pseudonyms in the press. You know?
Greg, this gets your comments here. People have asked me what I think, when the statues have come down of people.
Yeah.
And what are my thoughts on it? And I say that my thoughts on it are probably going to irritate everybody.
That means there are probably some interesting thoughts and worth interrogating.
But I, if you gave me the choice, I would tear down every statue of every human being that was ever put up. And that's because when you turn people into stone, they cease to be flesh and blood, and you forget that they had the same blood in their veins that you've got.
I can hear that.
James Madison, though, I think the other reason to look to him is, he comes in with the Virginia plan, right?
Yeah.
So we live in a world that's not exactly, but it's like shaped by his thinking.
Heavily.
And understanding how he builds that in, that notion of what people are. And it's honesty, I think it still holds true. It's fundamental to understanding the way the division of the government was set up.
Well, and that is where, and I get to this later in the book, as you know, but when we get to Federalist number 51, right, he says that men are not angels. I'm not even paraphrasing. I'm quoting the guy. Men are not angels. So while the founders did, and you hear this sometimes when we lament our present situation. I read so many articles to this effect that, public virtue is dying. And don't get me wrong. Public virtue, this is an idea of the founders about the need for education, for informed voters, for us participating. These things have to happen. I'm not dismissing that. But as important as that is, and as much as they push that, they also, I see this in Federalist 51, they also recognized that people sucked. Right? Like, that's what they were working with. They made that assumption. So yes, we need public virtue, and at the same time, we're purposely building a structure that is ready to endure the worst of humanity.
So talk about that, Greg, because one of the things I do love is that you explain, the Constitution is a document that I feel like people talk about all the time and don't read.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, unfortunately.
And I know that I teach U.S. history, and I see the education that people are coming out with. It has gotten worse and worse. And by the way, I want to be clear on this. When I tell you the story, I'm not in any way casting shade on my students. My students are good. They've learned what they're supposed to learn, many of them. I've got great students, right? But they've clearly not even been taught the Constitution. I have them read it every semester, no matter what U.S. history class I teach. And I got this semester like 3 or 4 people saying, okay, you said we have to read the Constitution. Do we have to read the articles? And I was like, that's like saying, so you said we have to eat this cheeseburger. Do we have to eat that meat patty and the cheese in the bun?
Yeah.
It's like, I get there's a preamble that's the lettuce, but, But they're like, we've memorized the lettuce. We had to do that. We didn't know why, but we had to. So could you talk about that, the way that you put this balance of power, and you kind of explain its origins, which everything makes more sense in a story, and you do this well. So could you talk about that?
Yeah. So when we, again, the premise, first of all, is that people are the worst, and we're building not just a republic, but with careful study, how to build a republic that can be bridged across a bunch of small republics, right? That's what this union is. And very intentionally leaning into separation of powers and checks and balances. These are two separate ideas. We sometimes just throw them all together, right? It gets blurted out, and much like the word liberty, right? These terms that we don't think very much of, we just say them. So, separation of powers, as Madison tells us in the Federalist Papers, it can't just be a separation on, and I'm quoting him, parchment. There has to be meaningful systems in place that force that separation. So that's where the checks and balances come into play to maintain that separation. So intentionally putting teeth into each of the branches. So they're mostly separate, yet they do overlap slightly in as much as they're positioned to be lobsters in a bucket. whenever one starts to climb up too much, the other branch can or will. It's incentivized to pull down. Now, that doesn't mean that it will or that it will do it as fast as we want it to, right? But the systems are in place to make it so that when one of those lobsters is getting too far up, eventually that's there, right? One of them's going to go, okay, no. You're getting too much power. I like my power, so I need you back down.
Are you guys all imagining lobsters with like James Madison's head and George Washington's head just being like, no? I marked that line, by the way. That made me laugh out loud when I was reading the book.
Thank
you. I was like, yes, this is it. I think it is great too because you get into this and you come at this from an angle of politics, which I think is interesting. I've always described the Constitution as a generational affair. There's this concept that in history that all revolutions are a generational affair. And you have the first generation that lives it, and the second generation knows it because they were there, but they were kids. And by the third generation, the revolution's dead. And that's the Civil War generation, really, in America. But when you think about it this way, what I say to them is, my students anyway, that the American Revolution for these founders was a master class in every which way the government could abuse you. And when they sat down to write the Constitution, the original text is about trying to set up a system that cannot reproduce that. And then the Bill of Rights, you can read the Bill of Rights as everything that happened to them. I mean,
absolutely,
it's literally you go, that happened, you can't do this. And yeah.
I mean, some of the things, they're just so specific, right? Yeah, it absolutely reads like if I may, it's like a divorcee listing all the things that they do not want in another partner, right? Yep, I remember when he did that, so that's never happening again.
And the government can only have our son every other weekend.
Boom. And it makes sense, right? Like, what are they going to think through? They've seen these very specific abuses. And they're also very careful to say that this isn't the limit. We're not putting a cap to call these the only rights that a citizen has, but there are some that we definitely know get abused by government. So we're going to list those right now.
The Ninth Amendment, the way I always do it is I have hand signals to remember it, and I put up 10 fingers and I hide my thumb, and I say, all right, you see 9 fingers? Doesn't mean the 10th isn't there, right? Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And I think when you consider it this way, you've tapped into the wisdom that these guys gained from it. But I think collectively, if you understand the story, what you really look at the Constitution is as a love letter from a past generation trying to do what all generations do, which is to prevent the next generation from going through what they went through.
Yeah.
And you can't replace that. That's the thing to remember. We got lucky. The stories you tell, and if there's any you want to go into, let me know. But the one that got me in this book was about the War of 1812, a war that we just kind of gloss over. We know anything about it. We're like tariffs or something. Andrew Jackson, but you've told this story about what it looks like on the ground. And could you tell a little bit about that story as a teaser for this book? Because that story had me really upset as I was reading it.
Sure, yeah. So as we get to the War of 1812. I mean, I know this is really hard to wrap our heads around, Ben, but hear me out. We have 2 political parties. 2. Okay. And they are both convinced that they are the real patriots. Again, I realize this is very unfamiliar turf. They go so far as to think that the other party are actually filled with traitors to the nation. Again, inconceivable today. I realize this. And so, as the Jeffersonian Republican-dominated Congress, so this party is also called Republicans, and let's be careful and clear. This party will eventually collapse, and then there will be another party started, right, in the 1850s. That's the GOP's origin point. But these early Republicans, these Jeffersonian Republicans, they control Congress. James Madison is a Republican. He's the founder of the party along with Jefferson. He just didn't get the credit. You know how it is. Tommy is always like, hey, little Jimmy, go do this thing. And he's like, sure. And then Tom's like, oh, it was a good thing? That's my credit right there.
Actually, I think Thomas Jefferson was like, hey, Jimmy, go do that. Didn't he have like a really high, he was like 6'2" and had a highest pitched voice? I love it.
Him, Lincoln, I guess that was a thing,
The taller you were, the more you lost, right?
There it is.
Taller.
Yeah. So, but the Republicans, they control Congress. We have a declaration of war. Federalists are, of course, aghast. That's the other party. And we have This gentleman, Alex, living in Baltimore, he is a hyper-partisan Federalist, and he has a newspaper confusingly named the Federal Republican. Yeah, it's great. But in it, he puts on blast the Republicans. I mean, he rips them apart for this declaration of war. It basically calls them, all traitors. You're the worst. James Madison is a puppet of Napoleon, things to that effect. And the Jeffersonian Republicans, respond just the way you'd expect in a responsible republic. They literally level his office building, the entire office building. They rip it down as the mayor stands on the side saying, "Please don't do that." Yeah. So Alex and his buddy Jacob, his co-editor, they respond in the only way one would expect. They come out with another paper. And when that one comes out, this is where things truly go off the rails. They have a new office building, and they've defended it. It's like Home Alone, right? Like they have set up, it is booby-trapped. It is ready for the attack. And there they are with the likes of Light Horse Harry Lee. He's a Federalist, so he's in the house with them. General James Lincoln, another former Continental soldier, officer, and it turns into a full-on street battle. The Republicans respond. They come throwing stones. Stones turn into musket fire. A cannon is brought out, and by the end of the night, to not give the whole story away, but to tell you where this goes, by the end of the night, these Federalists are placed in the jail, both said for protective custody and as being under arrest. The narrative is two different sides. The Republicans break into the jail to kill them, and the night does not end with everyone alive. I will leave it. I will say that they are beaten with sticks. Axes and swords are swung at them. They are poked with penknives. My absolute gut-turning moment, though, of all the violence carried out against them. Again, this is partisanship driving it, right? The Republicans, to check if they're alive, hold their eyes open. Their fellow Americans hold their eyes open as they drip candle wax, burning candles, drip candle wax on their eyeballs to see if their body convulses, reacts. Yeah, and as they do that. And this being a very gendered era, this is the men doing this. Their wives are present, screaming, "Kill the Tories!" And this is right out of primary sources. Children are dancing and clapping around them as the Republicans call these Federalists "quote unquote" Tories, which anyone who knows the Revolutionary history knows exactly what that means. Basically, traitors. So again, this is our allegedly enlightened early years. And this is where I just don't know what these enlightened years that we're supposedly trying to get back to are.
Yes, the nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right? That we could just get back to, and it's like, be careful where you stop when you go back.
Exactly.
This is a point that I think that your book makes really well here. You show that making good policy and creating a country we want to live in, we want policymakers who have great foresight. But I think your book makes the case that great leaders also need to have great hindsight.
Yes. I would absolutely agree with that.
I think we all should too. Yeah, that story, the story of the War of 1812, it hit me because I thought about how many of the people that were involved had been part of the founding.
I mean, the moment in that chapter, I'll go ahead and share this one too. The thing that hit me the most, it was General Lincoln's death. So General Lincoln, a Federalist, when he was a young Continental, he was nearly killed by Hessians in New York in George Washington's campaign in 1776, right? The year that tries men's souls. Hessian bayonet rips through his chest. He's taken prisoner by the British. He's on a British prison ship, which is pretty much the most miserable experience any American could have in the American Revolution. It's a death sentence, 9 times out of 10. I may be making up that statistic, but you take my point.
Got it.
Okay. He's approached by the British. This is true. He's approached by the British. He's offered a commission as a British officer clearly speaks to his intelligence and capability, and he's offered a huge signing bonus. Traditionally, that number is reported as 10,000 pounds. We don't know how accurate that is, though, but that's the reported number. That's a fortune. He says no. He believes in the revolution. Fast forward to 1812. He's a Federalist. Again, a patriot. He believes in this vision that aligns more with Hamilton's vision than James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. But in this hyper-partisan moment, these Republicans are convinced that Federalists are traitors. So he has been abused. He's been physically beaten along with his fellow Federalists. They're in this jail yard in Baltimore. And there's a conversation actively happening between the various Republicans about what they're going to do to Lincoln. And as one of them calls him a Tory and a traitor, because they know his past, right? So there's this moment of cognitive dissonance where the mob mentality breaks just a little bit, and this realization, wait a minute, this guy has given a lot for this country, and we're calling him a traitor. What are we going to do to him? And someone yells out something to the effect of, he might have been a patriot then, but he's a traitor now. Lincoln tears his shirt open and says, does this look as if I was a traitor? That nasty purplish hued skin on his chest where a Hessian bayonet nearly ended his life. The crowd responds by hurling a stone that strikes him and knocks him over. It hits him right on the scar. And then the penknives come out, the mob mentality's there, and they just fall on him. He's dead by morning. This hero of the revolution is killed by people who call themselves patriots.
It's heartbreaking. That's why I said when I read this chapter, I didn't know the story, and it hurt. And I think it's a good reminder, though, and this gets into an issue that you talk about in the book, that we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by stories that are, that you're directed with clear evidence. Don't track.
Yes.
But your gut gets a hold of you instead of your mind.
Yeah.
And we see the worst things happening whenever you allow that to happen. When you make these moves, this man who sacrificed, a man who could have, his last moments must have been thinking, like, did I make the right decision? This revolution is what he risked his life for. And now the outcome took his life.
Yeah. Well, arguably he ultimately lived for and did die for that dream, right? He is effectively our first documented death. And remember that this goes back to a fight over the press, right? Over a newspaper saying things that the other party didn't like. You could arguably say that James Lincoln, general in a state militia, is effectively our first documented death for the First Amendment, right? For the freedom of the press.
History That Doesn't Suck is sponsored by Indeed. If you run a small business like me, the right person can level everything up. I've got an awesome team, but as we grow, there's more pressure to continue to deliver more history that doesn't suck. So, as I'm thinking about growing the team, I wouldn't just be looking for a writer. I need someone with specific skills in research and citation, plus experience in narrative storytelling. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs is a boost whenever you need to find quality talent. Instead of struggling to get your job post even seen on other websites, Sponsored Jobs helps your role stand out in search results so you can reach candidates who meet your specific criteria. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates when you join the 3.3 million employers worldwide that use Indeed to connect with quality talent that fits your needs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. You just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. History That Doesn't Suck is supported by Quince. There is nothing worse than feeling trapped in heavy clothes during a heat wave. And that's why my summer uniform has become all about Quince. They make these incredibly high-quality essentials. Think breathable linen and soft organic cotton that keeps you feeling cool while looking totally put together. I recently took a Caribbean cruise with fans. I needed to look sharp for nightly dinners on board, and my Quince European linen suit was perfect. The tailored blazer and dress pants were stylish and literally cool. It's rare to find quality like this without the luxury price tag. but Quince keeps everything 50 to 80% less than similar brands by working directly with ethical factories. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/HTDS for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/HTDS for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/HTDS.
Mom, can you tell me a story?
Sure. Once upon a time, a mom needed a new car.
Was she brave?
She was tired, mostly. But she went to Carvana.com and found a great car at a great price. No secret treasure map required.
Did you have to fight a dragon?
Nope, she bought it 100% online. From her bed, actually.
Was it scary?
Honey, it was as unscary as car buying could be.
Did the car have a sunroof?
It did, actually.
Okay, good story.
Car buying you'll want to tell stories about. Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.
Now, again, as I pointed out earlier on, one of the things that you're really good at is you take us from just staring straight into the darkness.
Yeah.
And you pull us back out. And one of the things that you say that I like, we can feel overwhelmed whenever we see all of it at once. And I get it. And your opening line, you say, it's never been worse. The refrain is common. And although I reject it, I get it. And this is what I love about your approach. You're not telling people they're wrong. You're saying, I get why you feel this way, but I want to walk you through a story that pulls you out. And your simple solution, and I think this is why, in a weird way, this book can be called practical. It says, to fix the big things, what you can do is you can, as an individual, begin to steel yourself against the worst impulses. So could you talk about that?
Absolutely. And, I'm grateful to my editor. She pushed me on this. She's part of the reason why this book took more of that approach. To get back to where we started with this conversation, in a way, again, the founders assumed rightly that the worst of human impulses would attack this republic, and so they built it ready and able to endure our worst. But for it to truly endure, it also requires at least a core of us to give it our best. So that's where this concept of public virtue, it's a phrase that the founders used, right, comes up. Now, what does that idea of public virtue mean to us today? That's where I ultimately go. By the time after we go through these stories, that I hope, convinces all of us that we can get through our present, because we've been through so much worse. But how do we continue on? This isn't just hope for hope's sake. That's a fairy tale. Right? This is hope based in reality, which means we have things that we have to do. So that public virtue, that comes down to civic engagement. It comes down to perpetual learning, right? Not just going to college to get a degree. Right? And I think fewer people do that than sometimes is perceived. But Ben, we both had those students where you're like, okay, you're definitely here to get a piece of paper. But yeah. But so many others, and I think anyone listening to this podcast, right? These are your people who want to learn. You want to better yourself constantly. We need that, and that's what sharpens our mind to be able to discern and judge as we vote. And that brings us to civic engagement. Now, that can look like a lot of different things. At the high level, sure, it means running for office, but I also want to remind those listening and those who read the book that running for office doesn't mean running for Congress. Your city needs someone on the library committee, right? These appointed offices or volunteer positions, all of those things need to be done. And that is how we carry this republic forward. It's service, it's being educated, and we've got to curate our own media consumption in order to do that.
Yeah, the golden thing to me about history is that it is not a class. And people think of it as a class. My students go, I'm not good at history. I go, you're not good at anything that's happened before? Like, no, what you think is you're not good at memorizing names and dates outside of a context. I always tell them, I'm like, how many of you guys have seen the Avengers movie? And, a bunch of them raise their hand. And I go, tell me about Iron Man. And they'll, okay, well, he seems like he doesn't care, but he does, and then go into all these in-depth stories. And I go, like, how many hours have you spent watching an Avengers movie? And they're like, probably like 8 or 9. And I'm like, But what if I just gave you a list of all those characters with traits listed underneath them and sent you home right now and said, in 9 hours, come back, there's going to be a quiz on all these characters. Could you memorize like 30 characters and their traits? No. Well, yeah, exactly. Because if you think of history as random dates and on a list and not a story, then you're going to fail because you can't just, it doesn't matter, you know?
No, it doesn't. You have to have stories. And I've been right. This is what informs our approach. History has to have the story in it. That's what makes us care. So when you're invested in the characters, that it comes to life. And I think it's perfectly appropriate to think of these historical figures. And sure, we approach it. I mean, on HDDS, I approach this with rigor, primary and secondary sources. We never make anything up. But think of these past figures as characters, and we're following their arc.
Yeah, everything you read in history is just a previous chapter to the one you were born into.
Exactly.
You're writing a chapter now, but you weren't born into nothing. You were born into a story that was already being written, and if you don't know it, you're at a disadvantage.
And Ben, this is where I understand why we can feel like today is so bad, because you're on the blank page as it's being written. That's terrifying. It's always terrifying. It doesn't matter how bad those previous chapters were. You know that they end okay because your chapter exists. Right, so we can look at something as bleak as Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American history, and we can read about that. And it's not that we're dismissing the violence and death, the astounding figures of over 22,000 Americans becoming casualties that day. But we read that and we know that the Republic endures, that those deaths weren't in vain, that it led to the American experiment continuing. And there is a calming piece to that. And even if the Battle of Antietam, so long ago, we're not looking at those sorts of casualty numbers here in 2026, but we don't know what comes tomorrow. And that makes our tomorrow more scary than this awful day a century and a half ago.
But not scarier than their tomorrow.
Correct.
They had every bit the doubts and uncertainty about where things were going. Like, you know how it ends. They did not.
And that's what I want the reader to get. And they not only saw that sort of harrowing moment, but they passed this republic on to us. This republic that we have continued 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And your politics will inform what you think were those steps forward and those steps back. But I think most of us would agree, if we really pause and think about it, this is a better republic today than it was 250 years ago. That's longer than the Constitution, but let me embrace that number as we, live in this America 250 moment. Right? This started, beautiful as the ideas were, this started as a limited republic that by and large, you had to be a property-owning white man in order to have a vote in. We have expanded this for all of our concerns in the present. We have expanded this to truly being a republic where, again, we can talk about policy issues, but the premise is that as an adult with citizenship in this nation, no sex nor creed, you name it, is denied the vote, that you have that right. This is a wildly improved republic. If they could overcome their challenges and they could deliver us something better today, how on earth can we say to ourselves that we are incapable of doing the same for the next generation?
This is why I think staring into the darkness is important. There's 2 moments that I really, in my 20th century U.S. history class, I say, if you're looking at what's going on in Europe in the 40s, right, with the Nazi war machine,
right,
you could look at someone who could look at you and go, they're unstoppable, and you can understand why they would say that, but people didn't let that stop, and there are people who died on the beaches of Normandy to leave a world behind they never got to see.
Yeah. And they don't know how the story ended.
They don't.
That's it.
But they went in and they left this to us. When you look at the Freedom Riders, 1961, they go through the South. You look at that and you go, this isn't even a couple of years of a war machine. This is hundreds of years of white supremacy.
And Ben, can we just pause and think about the fact you're now naming a date that there are listeners right now who have memories, yes, right? It is not that long ago when you really pause and think about it.
Yeah, my father was born in 1945, and once we get past this, I constantly say, okay, so the Freedom Riders faced this in 1961. My father was 16.
Right.
roughly the same age as you guys are in this class right now. There's two ways that I always try to demonstrate to them. And this is why you got to stare into the darkness, because you got to say, there were people up against things that when you look at, you say, how would they ever get out of that? And then they did.
Bingo.
Because they didn't stop. They didn't believe the other stories. They said, well, either it will endure or I will go down trying to bring that to life.
And Ben, we can even go right back to the founding for that. I am so glad that that founding generation had the spirit of 76, that they did not say, well, yeah, we have these concepts of liberty, but they'll just never happen. Look at the way King George III abuses us. Oh, well, we don't have the vote in Parliament.
What are we going to do? Take on the world's greatest empire? We don't have a navy. Okay. The other two ways that I try to drive this home to my students is I go, all right, you guys are all like rah-rah democracy, like 1776. Okay, let's just do this experiment. This is great in a college classroom. I go, all right, white people, raise your hands. You know who you are, right? And they all raise their hands. And I go, all right, everybody, put them down except for white men. And then you got hands. I go, okay, cool. Now keep your hands up if you own property. And then a couple of them have their hands up. I go, not if your dad owns property, if you own property. And then all their hands go down. And then I go, oh, just me? I love this democracy. Let's get to voting. And then I go, now, and then I kind of laugh, and then I go, now put your hands up if you can vote now.
See, and that's beautiful, Ben.
I go, that's the difference. And I also remind them that, I can tell you this isn't even from 1776 to now. My father was born in 1945. In 1945, it was legal to segregate. Segregation was the practice of the day. My father was born in 1945 when segregation was endorsed by the federal government. When my son was born, we had a black president. That's a hell of a swing for 3 generations.
That is.
And it didn't happen because people gave up. Now, I want to interrogate something here. I want to bring something up here, because I know that anytime you say responsibility ultimately starts with yourself, there's a lot of people who go, oh, you can't do that because people are too dumb. And you have a great point in here. And you say that if you don't trust Americans' ability to judge news sources and sort through this, then you really ultimately don't trust Americans' ability to self-govern.
Yeah.
And to talk about this, back this up.
Yeah, Ben, writing this book, this project, it took me to places, again, that I just didn't expect. I didn't see coming. And I think our most profound moments often are the simplest, right? Like that, you're capturing something meaningful when, as you see it, you have the thought, how did I not see that before? That seems just so painfully obvious, and yet it crystallizes for you. For us to say, and this is built on, keep in mind, this book has been 3 years in the making, so I have now pored over the hyper-partisan print wars of the 1790s, the fake news being defined. I use only the definition given by journalists and academics, which is that it's not only incorrect information, but it is intentionally so. That is a meaningful delineation, right? That the reporter, herself, does not believe that it's true. They are trying to sow doubt. They're trying to obscure the truth. And we see that. I found it throughout the 19th century, but really coming to bear in a painful way in the yellow journalism of the late 19th century. Seeing these intentional attempts to obfuscate, to lead Americans astray, seeing political violence on the level of hot wax being dripped on people's eyeballs. So just stick with that example. There are plenty of others in the book, right? And contested elections that led to candidates for the highest offices both insisting that they won. I'm looking at all of these moments, and I see the American experiment enduring, and it is because our better angels refuse to give up. And that, to me, is government by the people, for the people, hanging in there. I think for us to cynically say that we can't do it today when the vote has never been more accessible, when we have never been more able to communicate, to only see the weaknesses of the ability of new technology to further sow seeds of doubt and not see the other side of that same sword, which allows us to better get information out. That is to admit that we do not actually believe in the American experiment, that we do not trust the American people to read, to evaluate, and to make decisions, and to mess up, absolutely, to cast votes that you will later regret. That is a part of the process. We don't get it right every single time, but in the long run, to believe that we will get to the right place, that we will keep this ship afloat. You cannot simultaneously reject the average American's ability to participate in the political process and say that you believe in the republic. That really came to be clear for me as I watched, as I read through and saw Americans imperfectly, generation after generation, sort through all of these same challenges with the news, with electoral processes, with political violence that we see today.
There's a line in here that I'm going to say right now, and then it goes along with this. But I want to say this because I realize that there will probably be an army of thousands of people who do not like this line and immediately go to debunk you. And the line is that the 24-hour news cycle of that began in the 1980s was a, quote, small-scale technological revolution. Not that big of a deal.
Sure.
So go get the book right now and write something meaningful. Don't just argue with me. I just said it, right? The book makes a good case. And if he's wrong, you need to read the book and just to prove that. I wonder, Greg, I want to pull outside the bounds of your book for a minute.
Okay.
And throw an idea at you that I have that I think might work well with this in terms of understanding it. And that is, if we look at the founding generation and understand how their world shaped, the decisions they made and how they saw the world, then it's worth contemplating where we are and where we might be. And I just want to lay out an idea for you. I have this, it's not a perfect kind of way to put about it, but that there's really two things that happened to the United States that continue to shape us and our perspectives on government. And the first thing is the end of the World War II moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Americans recognize, when the rest of the world is destroyed, you come home having defeated some of the greatest war machines ever created. You unlock the power of the atom.
Yeah.
You do all of that, and you come back to a world that is major cities are destroyed. You've convinced the rest of the world to use your currency as their currency, backed up by gold. You then loan hundreds of millions, I don't even know what the number is in today's terms, to the rest of the world, and then they pay you back with interest. It's the Best Buy model, right? That's the reason they always try to get you to get the credit card. Because the sell is sweet, but getting interest on it's even sweeter. And we had a 60% of the world's industrial capacity by the highest estimates, somewhere between 50 and 60%. And it happened in the Cold War at a time where we needed to tell the world that we were the best. And I think what happened is we started believing we were just special, that we're just special, that it's not work. It's not something that somehow some higher power has made us great. And that all fell apart in the 70s because the rest of the world rebuilt and started catching up with us. And that occurs at the same time as the public confidence breakers, which is Vietnam, Watergate. I would throw Iran-Contra in there, which often gets written out. Series of presidents from multiple parties. And between them, Jimmy Carter having the gall to tell Americans to buy less. Are you kidding me? You guys ever seen that jerk? He's up there all like, we have enough. Should we love our families and just be fine with this? And America's like, we're going to crucify you in 1980. But I think there's these two things, which is this break in trust, the Cold War era belief that we're just special because of a momentary thing that happened. And I think that we are, the analogy I use is we're in mourning. And what's happened with our partisanship is that when Carter said to everybody, hey, look, you can't have everything forever, infinitely, the Democrats said, nah, let's not do that again. And they've been locked in the denial phase of mourning. But the Republicans have advanced to the anger stage of mourning. And that's the reason they're winning, because they're more advanced. But I think that that's what shapes us, is this kind of, we don't want to acknowledge what's happened, but that we need to really, to be able to process all this, get to the acceptance phase. What do you think about this?
Ben, I'm processing some of what you put before me here, man.
I wish Greg goes, nah, that was stupid.
No, not at all. No, not at all. You know how slow, methodical, and meticulous I am.
Let me put it another way, Greg.
No. I'm with you. I actually really think that this is an interesting framework. My reaction to that is to say that I definitely believe, and I believe it because of my studies, not out of some gut sense. I believe that the American Republic, the Constitution as conceived, and the way that we have altered and amended those crucial concepts to what we are today continues to be imperfect, but a still more perfect union. It is special. I do believe it's special. That's not a special that allows you to stop working. And that is what gets to what you're pointing to. And that is the failure that I think we do grapple with in the present, is the sense that we're supposed to, because of the specialness of this framework, just have special outcome all the time. Rather, Uncle Sam, if we can personify the nation, has to remember that being an elite athlete means continuing to train.
Yes.
You don't get to sit back and just call it a day just because you've got gold medals. If you want to keep winning gold, you have to stay sharp. And I suppose in a way we might say what I'm begging Americans to do, what I'm pleading with Uncle Sam to do in this book, is to remember that, one, you're complaining about a race today that is shorter and has a lower threshold in order to qualify than races you have smoked in the past. Please remember that. And two, you know what? You are right that you can't qualify today if you're not going to train. And that is where I get back to this being a reality-grounded hope. This is not a promise that everything's going to be great, butterflies and, ponies for everyone. No. This republic is something special and delivers something special when the American people live up to the hard work that it is to have those gifts. And that hard work does include constant partisanship. It can be better than it is right now, I do believe. But you do have to accept that partisanship is a constant.
Yeah, no, I like it. That makes me happy, because I think that in this is the idea that sometimes we what we have here is an inheritance, and that's what history is studying the inheritance that was left to you. And if you're not careful, you can squander it. But if you
Amen.
understand it was an inheritance that you didn't earn and study the people who passed you the inheritance, then you can be a good steward to it.
This is an amazing trust. Don't blow it.
Yes, because I just think that if you believe that you're inherently special and things don't feel really great for you, you are prone to be duped by the worst people. Because a mindfulness, right? A mindfulness that this was passed to you when things go wrong. The smart question is what happened. But the demagogues always say, who did this? And feeling like you're special means you're supposed to be special. It must be someone's fault whenever you don't feel good.
Well, and that is why I do like holding to the idea that our ideas, our framework, that is special. I do not want to mistake myself for being special.
Yes.
What we have is special. It deserves my blood, sweat, and tears to hold it together. And I can't do that by myself. It is we, the people. We are in this together. And that means across the aisle, too. Right? I need smart people who disagree with me to participate.
That's beautiful. I like that distinction, because it's like we're not special, but we have something special. It's ours. That's beautiful. To conclude here, I want to ask you about something that's different about this book than your podcast.
Okay.
Your podcast is beloved, and I love it too, because, Greg, I just want to say this. You and I have become friends over the idea that at the starting point, from moment one with history, it belongs to all of us.
Yes.
And it never fits what you want it to fit. And, when you tell the story honestly, no one gets exactly what they want.
Amen.
But you still got to tell the story to understand how it processed. And this is what I love about you, Greg. And this is why this book is important. And this is why this country needs you. And I'm honored to be here with you right now. But you do something different here, because in this book, you really engage with very recent history in a way that I think both your audience will find different, but also even us as historians sometimes hesitate to step outside the bounds of, at least 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And this comes with your discussion of the election of 1876 and the parallels with the election of 2020. And I was wondering if you could talk about that and how you came to the decision to step into that when it is different than what we've seen from you before.
With my gut in a knot then, because I didn't want to. We get back to projects being bigger than ourselves, right? Where we end up in places we didn't foresee. And so many times as I work through, whether it's getting to political philosophy, as I'm diving into Madison in a way I didn't expect, but that kind of feels a little bit better. I did not foresee, and upon reflection, I feel like I should have. I felt compelled as a historian. I had to. How could I write a book in which I engage with the election of 1876, which I selected because it's truly the most corrupt election. I stand by that. It is the most corrupt election, presidential election in American history. It is an election in which 4 states sent more than one set of electoral votes to Congress. Florida sent 3. Yeah, Florida, of course.
Well, Greg, can I also add, I'm from North Carolina, so I'm obligated to point out that South Carolina sent totals that were 101% of the population, thus proving my North Carolinian claim that South Carolinians can't count. Anyway, go ahead.
So, I started there because this is such an egregious failure, right? In South Carolina's 101%. You talk about voter fraud, that's when it's obvious. That is when it's up. Even the humanities guy can look at that and go, something's wrong. Yeah, I can handle that math. But for all the talk of bribery, the actual murder, right? Deaths at the hands of paramilitary groups, the White League and so forth, killing black voters. What I did not appreciate, even though I lived through this, right? But the way it hits after I have torn through this election and the history of all the moments at which Congress had to sort through contested elections, the way that 1876 was so pivotal in what Vice President Mike Pence had to say that very day, and what Senator Lindsey Graham said that night after January 6th as the Senate reconvened. In my mind, to be the historian that I am, the historian that my audience knows, and beyond audience, the historian I want to be, I have to follow the sources. That's what a historian does. It doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable. That discomfort is much easier to handle when it's 150 years ago. Even now, as HCS gets into World War II, it's still easier. But now I'm dealing with this discomfort right in my face in 2020, having not appreciated how into the present that assessing the election of 1876 was going to take me. One, I think doing this in a book gives me a space to be able to do this without broaching that on HTDS, right? But 2, I did realize that January 6th deserved the same sort of analysis that I brought to the Baltimore riots of 1812, right? To try and tear through the sources and tell the story, as you said, Ben, without you're not looking to make heroes, you're not looking to make villains, you're trying to let the sources do the talking. And it was an important component of showing how the election of 1876, this moment that broke us, or at least that's how Americans felt. Jeremiah Black, an attorney who represented the Democrats as the election turned into an absolute nightmare of a fight in Congress. He exclaimed that we will never have such a thing as an honest election again. He wasn't being hyperbolical. He was confident. He was sure that this election had broken America, that the presidential election of 1876 had ensured it. And for me to then tear through this moment in 2020, this moment that to this day it hurts for Americans of all sorts of political convictions, to feel that same sort of sentiment. And for me to be able to look at Jeremiah, see that same despondency, right? To look into that abyss and see him there, see his face reflected back at mine. And then to be able to think that we've gotten to a place that this is such a forgotten election, that there's this vague recollection that something seedy happened. but that we could have these great highs, this golden era that followed, that we all now look back upon, right, and romanticize. This was far before America's peak 20th century moments. If we could build to that and be in a place where the senator from the state that cast 101% of their of their votes has to remind his colleagues on the Senate floor of that election and how it went, because even they don't remember the details. That tells me 2020 is not insurmountable. This republic is absolutely viable. And that is where we get hope out of the darkness. And how could I not bring that to bear?
I agree, Greg. And you guys should read the book. Check it out for yourself. I couldn't recommend it more. This is a book that I feel like Americans need to read. And I feel like, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like we're finally getting tired of it. I feel like we're finally getting tired of being told that we shouldn't trust our brothers and sisters, that fellow Americans, that we shouldn't talk to them. And I think this book right here is a bridge that we need between that divide to hopefully eventually just close the chasm, because it doesn't need to be there. The book has been
Thank
there,
you.
done that, how our history shows what we can overcome. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding for Dr. Greg Jackson.
HTDS is supported by fans at htdspodcast.com/membership. My gratitude to you kind souls providing funding that helps keep going. Thank you. And a special thanks to our patrons, whose monthly gift puts them at producer status. Adam Gorin, Othna Chapman, Amy and Ross Hinsman, Andrew Nissen, Andrew Sherwin, Anna M. Hutta, Art Lane, Bob Stinnen, Bonnie Brooks, Brian Gadigan, Brian Boyles, Brian Goodson, Bruce Hibbert, Hayden Howitz, Charles Clendenin, Charles Starkey, Charlie Magus, Christopher Merchant, Christopher Liesel, Christopher Pullman, Cindy Rosenthal, Colleen Martin, Colin Ferris Pennington, Connor Hogan, Craig Burhost, Dan G., Daniel Beecham, Daniel O'Conney, Darren Chambers, David Rifkin, Dean Heiser, Durante Spencer, Donald Moore, Ely Edwards, Elizabeth Chris Jansen, Ellen Stewart, Ernesto Franco, Bernie Lowmaster, Ethan Lowery, Evan Thompson, G2303, Jeffrey Nelson, George J. Sherwood, Gareth Griffin, Gina Johnson, Gordon Garwood, Henry Brunges, Holly Hamilton, Jake Gilbreth, James Bledsoe, James Blue, James Schlender, Jarrett Zongora, Jeffrey Moots, Jennifer Mingione, Jennifer Roof, Jeremy Wells, Jessica Poppett, Joe Dobis, John Boovy, John Frugal Dougal, John Huber, John Messmer, John Oliveros, John Rudlevich, John Schaefer, Jonathan Sheff, Jordan Corbett, Joseph Curry, Joshua Steiner, Julian Wright, Justin May, Carl and Elizabeth Saley, Carl Friedman, Carl Hindle, Carl Romer, Ken Culver, Kim R., Kristen Pratt, Kyle Decker, L. Paul Goringer, Laura Norman, Lawrence Neubauer, Linda Cunningham, Mark Ellis, Marcia Smith, Mason Glenn, Matt Siegel, Michael Sullivan, Nick Cafferel, Owen W. Sedlak, Peter Hugenroth, Philip May, Randy King, Rich Ruckel, Rick Brown, Robert Drazovich, Rock Day, Sam Holtzman, Sarah Prescott, Sarah Treyway, Scott Hurst, Shannon Hoagland, Sharon Thiessen, Sean Baines, Sean Collins, Stacy Ritter, Steve Williams, Creepy Girl, Thomas Churchill, Thomas Matthew Edwards, Thomas Sabbath, Tim and Sarah Turner, Todd Curran, Tom Bastafka, Walter M. Ames, Wesley McCage, and Zach Jackson. Join me in 2 weeks, where I'd like to tell you a story.